Okay, hello, welcome. Thank you for watching. Today, we are going to talk about the year 2016. 2016 was a big year. A lot of stuff going on in and around the country in 2016. So a lot to get into today. I think you guys, most of you should have been around 11 years old or so during the year 2016. So should really start remembering a lot of the stuff that happened. All right, just so we know, because we're not counting down. However, if we were to be counting down, we would note that there are only 13 days of school left. So 13 days of school left. Secretary Hillary Clinton is singing the praises. President Obama is still dancing. President Trump giving us a thumbs up, and Harambe he's like, yep, 13 days of school left. All right. So we're going to start off 2016 with the Flint water crisis. I'm sure this is something most of you have heard of and or remember talking about at some point. So basically in the city of Flint, Michigan, back in 2014, they changed what had previously been the source of their drinking water for the city, which was Lake Huron, and the people in charge of the city and all of that stuff, they decided to change that to the Flint River as being the main source for the drinking water. And that's wherein lied the problem. Officials, when they implemented this change, failed to apply corrosion inhibitors to the water. And then a series of problems led to lead contamination in the drinking water. So if you lived in Flint, you basically couldn't drink the water, or else you would potentially be subjected to lead poisoning. President Obama declared a federal state of emergency for the city of Flint, and 6,000 to 12,000 children in Flint have been exposed to lead poisoning as a result. Residents were advised to only drink from bottled water, not to drink, out of the water that comes out of their sink or faucet. And this issue to this day has yet to be completely fixed. It's been kind of a big, bungled, ugly mess. Just everything that has gone into it. This is Michigan Governor at the time, not currently, but Michigan Governor Rick Snyder. His administration has been widely blamed for the mistakes that led to the crisis, with numerous people calling for his resignation. He never did resign. However, when he was up for re-election, he did not win, as he is not currently the governor of Michigan anymore. Sadly, in 2016, we saw the deadliest mass shooting in U.S. history. And what happened there, this is 29-year-old Omar Mateen. He went to a nightclub called Pulse and killed 49 people and wounded 53 more in what has since been called a terrorist attack and a hate crime. So the shooting occurred inside Pulse nightclub, which was a gay nightclub in the city of Orlando, Florida. So part of that being a hate crime was that part of his motivation was that he wanted to kill gay people. And also part of it being called a terrorist attack is because he had sworn allegiance to the leader of ISIS in Iraq and said that the shootings were triggered because of U.S. interventions in both Iraq and Syria. So he basically had a standoff with the Orlando Police Department the night of the shooting, and the police eventually shot and killed him after a 3-hour standoff. In the wake of this, and again, if you remember back to some of the previous years that we've talked about, we talked about the Sandy Hook shooting, we talked about the San Bernardino shooting, and some others. So there was a lot of national debate over, should there be more gun control laws? And that was largely put forward by Democrats at the time. And this is Democratic Senator from Connecticut, Chris Murphy here. He actually held a 15-hour filibuster in Congress demanding more strict gun control laws. Some of the things that he and others were calling for were universal background checks and a ban for anyone that is on a federal terrorist watch list, that they wouldn't be able to buy a gun. The reason that that was included here was because Omar Mateen, this guy here that shot and killed all these people, he was actually on a federal terrorist watch list, but was able to legally purchase a gun. So that was one of the things that was proposed as part of these new gun control laws. 60 other House Democrats staged a sit-in. Harkening back to like civil rights era days, they staged a sit-in on the House floor demanding a vote on gun control laws, and this was led by the now late Congressman John Lewis, who was also a civil rights protester. He was a young man, and he was beaten by police in Selma when we talked about that in that march. But anyway, he helped lead this. It lasted 25 hours. However, no new gun control laws were ever voted on or came about in the wake of this. So no changes to gun control laws were actually made. And as we've been mentioning, there's been a theme of police violence and police killings of black men throughout the last few years we've been talking about. And another instance in 2016 with this guy here, Alton Sterling, 37 years old. He was shot several times. This is from a video taken of the shooting. He was shot at close range while being held down by two police officers. This took place in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. The reason that they stopped him was because he was suspected of illegally selling CDs. Again, which kind of raises a question, is that something worth losing your life over? We talked about in 2015, Walter Scott was pulled over for having a brake light out, and he was ultimately shot and killed. Tamir Rice was playing in Cleveland, 12 years old, playing with a toy gun in a park, shot and killed. So Eric Garner selling cigarettes in New York City. So again, this is one of those things that brought a lot more protests. Now, Alton Sterling was armed. He did have a gun, and it was in his front pocket. And officers claimed that he did reach for it. And the video that was taken is unclear whether or not he was reaching for it or not. So, regardless, protests were held in Baton Rouge of his killing. But ultimately, the Department of Justice did not file criminal charges against these officers. So they weren't charged with, murder or anything like that. One day later, so I believe this happened on July 4th in 2016, and then July 5th of 2016 in Minnesota, this guy here, Philando Castile, is driving a car, his girlfriend in the front seat, and her 4-year-old daughter in the back seat, and he's pulled over by a police officer because the reason given that the officer pulled them over is he thought that he and his girlfriend matched the description of someone that had been involved in a robbery. They had not. They weren't those people. But that was the reason given that he was pulled over. Castile was a licensed gun owner, a license to conceal carry. And one of the things that you're told or taught when you're licensed to do that is that if you have an encounter with the police, you're supposed to tell them as soon as possible that you are armed. And he did that. He was armed. He had a gun on him, and he told the officer that he was licensed to carry and that he actually, had his weapon in his pocket, in his pants pocket. The officer asked for his identification, and as he was reaching to get his identification out of his back pocket, the officer shot him 7 times. Castile's girlfriend, who was in the front seat when this happened, she immediately, after he was shot, got on Facebook Live and streamed kind of what was happening in the moment, which obviously made this become even more well known and mainstream. The officer did not try to apply any type of life-saving aid. He waited for the my wife's trying to call me right now. He waited for the ambulance to arrive, and Philando Castile died in the emergency room 20 minutes after being shot. Protests were held near St. Paul, Minnesota, where this took place. Again, more protests about why this happened, and that officer was later acquitted of wrongdoing and murder. He was charged with murder, but was acquitted, which caused again more protest and anger. This one in particular, all of these shootings are tragic, but this one kind of stuck home with me a little bit more because when I was young, I think I was 18 or 19, I was out with some friends one night. It was late, it was dark, it was probably like midnight, 1 a.m., something like that. I was in college. But I was driving my car, and I was pulled over for I think for speeding or something along those lines. Maybe a stop sign violation. I honestly don't remember exactly why I was pulled over. But when the officer came to my car, it was in the summer, so I had my windows down. When the officer came to my car, I was reaching for my registration. I was trying to grab it out of my glove box because I know that police ask for your license and registration when they pull you over. So I was already I was trying to be prepared when he walked up to my car. But as I was doing that, and he walked up to my car, he thought I might be reaching for a weapon or something else. He didn't know what I would have been reaching for, and the next thing I know, he has pulled his weapon, his gun, and basically has his gun to my head, and tells me to put my hands on the dashboard, which I immediately complied with, and I almost almost went to the bathroom in my pants. I was terrified. So to this day, one of the most scared I've ever been. And when this happened, I thought to myself, what would have happened if I weren't white? If I were a black man, would I be dead today in that incident because of that? So of all of the police shootings that we've talked about, and again, very tragic, all of them, this one was the one that kind of struck the biggest chord personally with me, because I had a run-in, and luckily for me, it went much different. And maybe that's because of other factors, but also maybe it's because I'm white. So yeah, that one really affected me a lot. So don't speed, and wait for the cop to ask for your stuff before you reach for it. Anyway, on the other side of that, there was a shooting of police officers also in 2016 in Dallas. There was a Black Lives Matter protest going on in Dallas. It was completely peaceful. There were police officers there, as there are at many other protests, just in case. But there was no interaction between the crowd and the police, like no negative interaction or anything like that. But so during this protest, an Army Afghan war veteran ambushed and fired on a group of police officers. This is him here, Micah Xavier Johnson. So in the aftermath of this, five officers were killed, 9 others were injured, and he had said that he was angry over recent police shootings, like the ones we just talked about, and the previous ones in previous years, of black men, and stated that he wanted to kill white people. So he fled to a building, and a standoff with police ensued. And he was later killed by a C4 bomb that was delivered by a robot. I think it was like in a parking garage, maybe, if I remember correctly. They weren't able to, safely kind of get to him by person, so they sent in this robot and delivered this bomb, and that explosion killed him. All right, whew. Heavy stuff, right? So there was in 2016, there was a big kind of standoff over the Supreme Court politically. On February 13th, so towards the beginning of the year of 2016, longtime Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia dies. This is Antonin Scalia here. Kind of unexpected. He wasn't necessarily in bad health. He just kind of died. I think he had a heart condition, maybe, but he wasn't like crazy super old or anything. So people, it was unexpected. So within an hour of the news that he had died, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell gives a press conference and announces that the Senate would not confirm a replacement for Antonin Scalia until after the 2016 election. Now, this was really weird because, as we know, the kind of checks and balances of our government, the executive branch or the president nominates a justice to the Supreme Court, but then they don't just take that seat by his nomination, then they have to be confirmed by the Senate, right? So a majority of senators have to vote and say yes, this person can go on the Supreme Court after they've been nominated. What was weird about this is the year 2016 was an election year. Elections don't happen until November, right? And then the new president doesn't come into office until the next year in January. So what Mitch McConnell was saying was that he made the argument that since it's an election year, he wanted to leave this decision on who would be on the Supreme Court to the voters. So so Barack Obama obviously wasn't going to be able to run for re-election because he was finishing his second term. So whether it was going to be Hillary Clinton or eventually Donald Trump, who does become president, whoever wins that election, the argument McConnell was making, whoever wins that election should be the person that fills that vacancy. Let the people talk. The election will show who the people want, the American people want to be on the Supreme Court. So that was the argument made. Well, President Obama didn't like that argument, and he said, well, I'm going to nominate someone for the Supreme Court anyway, because that's what I'm supposed to do. And so he nominates this guy here, who is Merrick Garland, to fill that vacancy. Merrick Garland, if you're into politics today, if you watch politics at all, you might know today he never sat on the Supreme Court, was never confirmed, but he is now the Attorney General of the United States. Very recently, President Biden now appointed Merrick Garland to be the Attorney General. So now Merrick Garland is the Attorney General. Anyway. So Obama nominates Merrick Garland. The Senate holds true to Mitch McConnell's words and they refuse to hold a confirmation hearing for Merrick Garland. What is ironic about that, and the argument that Senator McConnell was making, was that 13 Supreme Court vacancies in the past before this had been confirmed in the final year of a presidency. So it was really I don't want to sound partisan, like I'm taking one side over the other. But I do like to hold people accountable, whether they're for the party I support or not. So it was. I just want to be real with you. It was a bunk argument because, and we know that for sure because now 14 Supreme Court vacancies have been filled in the final year of a presidency. In fact, it just happened last year, in the last year of Trump's presidency. He nominated a Supreme Court justice in his election year, in his re-election year, and Senator McConnell and other members of the Republican Party that made this same argument about Merrick Garland completely switched gears and quickly confirmed that nomination in 2020. So again, not to be partisan, but we should hold our politicians accountable for what they say. And this was a case of them completely going against their word. All right. And then one of the biggest stories of 2016 was the 2016 election. So there's a big primary for the Republican Party. In fact, at one point, there were 17 candidates vying for the nomination. You can see all of them here. The early leaders, though, were, let me circle these people. Early leaders, kind of the early favorites, were Ted Cruz, senator from Texas, this guy here. Marco Rubio, senator from Florida, this guy here. And Jeb Bush, brother of George W. Bush, former president, son of George H.W. Bush, former president, and he himself, former governor of Florida. And then early on, kind of a surprise, everybody, early on in the polls, this guy here, Ben Carson, kind of was the early leader early on in the process. But ultimately, this guy here, Donald Trump, kind of began stealing a lot of the headlines. A lot of news reporters followed him, and it was kind of all anybody talked about early on was what he was doing and what he was saying, and so kind of in the wake of that, his poll numbers started to soar and his popularity started to soar, and he gained support throughout the process and eventually won the nomination of the Republican Party despite some controversies. He had at one point during the election called for a Muslim ban. I mentioned that in the year 2015 when we talked about that after the San Bernardino shootings. And he was also accused of promoting violence at his campaign rallies. In fact, one of his campaign rallies in Chicago was canceled by the venue because they were afraid of some of that violence. But yeah, you can see here kind of the map of the primary, all the states that he won. John Kasich, former governor of Ohio, he won Ohio. It was the only state he won. But Ted Cruz won the next most amount of states. Marco Rubio wins one. Not even his own home state, though, unfortunately for him. So yeah. So for the Republican side, we have Donald Trump as the candidate going into the 2016 election. And then in the Democratic primary, you have, again, President Obama is serving out the end of his second term, so he can't run for re-election. And his vice president, Joe Biden, decides not to run in the 2016 election. Mostly, again, in 2015, his son, Beau, passed away. And he said kind of, he was still mourning the loss of his son. He wasn't really up for campaigning, so he did not run. So you had former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton being the front runner in this election. And the other kind of front runner in the Democratic Party was this guy here, Bernie Sanders. So this was the main race for the Democrats on who would be the nomination. There were other candidates, again, Martin O'Malley, Lawrence Lessig, Lincoln Chafee, and Jim Webb. None of them were really contenders to either of these two, and ultimately in the end, despite the amount of support that Bernie Sanders was able to amass, especially from young voters, Hillary Clinton eventually wins the nomination. So we have Trump versus Clinton in the 2016 election. So their vice presidential picks. Trump chooses Indiana Governor Mike Pence to be his vice presidential running mate. Hillary Clinton chooses Virginia Senator Tim Kaine to be her running mate. And we saw a lot of controversies in this election. I'm sure you guys probably remember hearing of at least some of these. So the director of the FBI, his name was James Comey. And during this election, he tells Congress that they were investigating the use of a private email server by Hillary Clinton while she was the Secretary of State. And we talked about this in 2015 as well, because that came out with the Benghazi hearings. So after investigating that for a while, Comey and the FBI later recommended against indicting her. He basically said that, while it wasn't great that she was using this private email server, there wasn't really anything that could be found that she was doing nefarious to charge her with a crime or anything like that. So 11 days before the election, however, Comey goes to Congress again and tells them that they were reopening this investigation because some new evidence or new emails were found or something along those lines. And then 2 days later, 2 days before the election takes place, he announced that new evidence, there was nothing there either. And to this day, Hillary Clinton puts a lot of blame on James Comey for her, one of the reasons that she lost that election by doing this, a week and a half before the election. Also, another controversy was that the website WikiLeaks released emails from Clinton's campaign manager. His name was John Podesta. So it kind of gave people an inside look at her campaign and some of the things they were talking about. And Russia was accused and has since been confirmed that they were the ones that hacked those emails and provided them to WikiLeaks to release. There was also the Access Hollywood recording, which made Trump look bad. He was recorded in 2005, kind of on a hot mic situation where his mic was live, but they weren't filming, so he was talking, and he made some pretty lewd and obscene comments about women. So that was released, and then also Russia's involvement in the election was a big controversy in 2016 as well. Here's the election map. You can see the red states are the ones that Trump won. The blue states are the ones that Clinton won. Trump wins the electoral vote, 306 electors to 232. Remember, you need 270 officially to win. And here is the popular vote up here. So you can see Hillary Clinton had around 3 million more votes, popular votes, than President Trump did. So we have another instance. Again, it happened in the election of 2000, where President Bush lost the popular vote, but won the electoral vote. And now it happens again with President Trump. And then it had happened also 3 times prior. The last being like 1864, the election of 1864 with Rutherford B. Hayes. So again, Donald Trump wins the election of 2016 in what some call the biggest upset in presidential election history. So some interesting facts about that. He becomes the only president ever elected with no prior either political experience or military experience. So usually, up to that point, all of our former presidents had a foot in one or the other. They either had a long time political career or a military career. Again, he was the 5th person elected while losing the popular vote. He was the oldest person ever elected president, beating Ronald Reagan out for that. But he himself was beaten in that regard more recently with the election of President Biden. So he held that distinction for only 4 years. And again, some controversy over this. Just days after he wins this election, the director of the FBI that we mentioned before, James Comey, this guy here, he tells Congress that they are investigating any possible ties between members of Trump's campaign and Russia. And so that's going to become a pretty big theme in the first couple of years of Trump's presidency, is the Russia investigation. So spoiler alert, this guy's going to lose his job over it. And so we'll talk more about that when we talk about the next couple of years. Some other key events of 2016. In Cincinnati, at the Cincinnati Zoo, a 3-year-old boy, here's the boy up here, a 3-year-old boy falls into a gorilla enclosure at the Cincinnati Zoo and was grabbed and dragged by 17-year-old gorilla Harambe. And Harambe was then, out of fear for the life of this boy, was shot and killed by a zoo worker. So R.I.P. Harambe. And if you're ever at the zoo with a 3-year-old or somebody younger, I'm going to take Max to the Toledo Zoo a lot this summer. I'm planning, at least. Don't let your kid climb over or fall into a gorilla or any other animal exhibit. Don't let that happen. Also, kind of a shocking vote happened in the UK that became known as Brexit. So in that vote, the UK voted to leave the European Union. It's been a mess trying to figure out the details of that ever since. It's still something that's kind of ongoing to this day. They've delayed this several times because they just can't quite get that right. So kind of a crazy thing that happened. President Obama became the first sitting president to visit Cuba since the 1920s. So again, we talked about the Cuban thaw recently, and that was a part of that. The spread of the Zika virus throughout the Americas caused alarm, and the WHO announced the end of the epidemic in November of 16. So didn't quite reach the level of an epidemic or pandemic as what we're used to now in current history. And lastly, the Standing Rock and Dakota Access Pipeline protests became major news. Siri thought I was talking to her. These are some of the people we lost in 2016. One of the greats. 2016 was a rough year. So yeah, we lost Prince and David Bowie, one of my favorites.
Okay. I found this on the web for, and lastly, the City Rockefeller Access Pipeline protest.
Oh my gosh. All right. Sorry about that. Also, this guy here is Gene Wilder, played the original Willy Wonka. He passed away in 2016. One of the great actors of our time, Alan Rickman. You guys might know him better as Professor Snape. He passed away. Nancy Reagan, former First Lady. Muhammad Ali, one of the greatest heavyweight boxers of all time. Princess Leia herself, Carrie Fisher, and Ohioan and astronaut John Glenn. He passed away in 2016. All right, let's take our checkpoint real quick. Who did President Obama nominate to fill the Supreme Court seat left vacant when Justin Antonin Scalia died? Sonia Sotomayor, Neil Gorsuch, John Roberts, or Merrick Garland? And yes, Merrick Garland is correct, although he never received a confirmation vote and is now our Attorney General. Neil Gorsuch is actually the person that was nominated when President Trump took office and filled that vacancy. Which was not a candidate in the Republican primary? Marco Rubio, Ben Carson, John Kasich, Jeb Bush, Ted Cruz, Bernie Sanders, or Donald Trump? And Bernie Sanders is the correct response here because he was a candidate in the Democratic primary. In which country is accused of interfering in the 2016 presidential election? And that is Russia. All right. This is me in 2016. I got married. Yay. This is my wife and I on our honeymoon in Jamaica, which we're going back to this summer in July. So looking forward to that. We also went to Cancun that year over our Thanksgiving break, which was probably my favorite Thanksgiving of all time. And that's me and some of my best friends in 2016. So, all right. I will see you guys next week. Have a good day.